Scroll back far enough through your phone and you will find a photo from years ago, maybe a birthday or a holiday, maybe just an ordinary afternoon that somehow got remembered. The moment is all there. The light, the faces, what someone was wearing. Everything about that specific point in time, preserved exactly as it was. Now think about where it actually lives, not in some server building somewhere. In a chip smaller than your thumbnail, inside a plastic shell the size of a grain of rice, generating no heat, making no sound, using no power to hold on to it. That chip is the MicroSD card, one of the most overlooked pieces of technology in daily life, and one of the most quietly extraordinary. How does something that small hold so much without losing a single pixel of a photograph taken half a decade ago? Let's get into it right here on Secrets of Simple Things. Not what storage looks like. Most people, if asked to picture storage, imagine something physical: a filing cabinet, a hard drive with a spinning disk, a drawer full of things, each taking up space. A microSD card works on none of those principles. There is no spinning disk. There are no moving parts. The data inside exists as electrical charges held in cells so small they are invisible to the naked eye, and those charges do not need power to stay. This is flash memory. The charges that represent your data simply sit there, stable and silent, after the power is removed. The card can be in a drawer for years, and the data will still be there when you put it back in a device. The race to disappear. Storage did not begin small. It began as furniture. The earliest computer storage systems were room-sized machines, then cabinet-sized, then desk-sized, then the size of a stack of books. Each generation of engineers faced the same challenge: take the same amount of storage and make it smaller, cheaper, and less likely to break. The history of storage is, in one sense, the history of things disappearing. The floppy disk arrived in the 1970s and moved data without wires. The hard drive shrank through the 1980s and 1990s from a platter the size of a dinner plate to something that fitted into a laptop. Flash memory, which stores data in semiconductor cells rather than on magnetic surfaces, arrived in commercial products in the late 1980s and offered something none of its predecessors could match. No moving parts, no mechanical arms sweeping across a spinning disk. No heads that could skip or scratch, just a solid block of silicon with charges sitting in it. The SD card was introduced in 1999 by a consortium of companies including SanDisk, Panasonic, and Toshiba. It was designed for digital cameras at a time when storing a few hundred photographs on a card the size of a postage stamp felt like a small miracle. The standard card was compact. But as mobile phones began to dominate the early 2000s, compact was not small enough. In 2004, SanDisk introduced a card called the TransFlash. It was roughly a quarter of the size of the standard SD card, small enough to fit inside a phone without taking up meaningful space. The following year, the SD Association adopted and renamed it the MicroSD card, standardizing the format so that a single card could move between phones, cameras, and other devices made by different manufacturers. That standardization was quietly important. Before it, different devices used different formats that were often incompatible. After it, the same card you used in your camera could move into your phone. The same card you bought in one country worked in devices bought in another. One format accepted everywhere, which meant manufacturers could invest in making it smaller and denser without worrying about fragmented markets. From the original cards holding a few megabytes, the technology expanded across 2 decades to support first gigabytes, then hundreds of gigabytes, then terabytes of storage. The physical card got no larger. The amount it could hold grew by a factor of hundreds of thousands. How invisible charges become a photograph. So how does it actually work? Start with a photograph. Before it can be stored, it has to become something a semiconductor can hold. Every photograph, every video, every document is converted into binary code before it touches the card. Binary is the language of ones and zeros, and every piece of digital information, a face in a photograph, a note in a song, a line of dialogue in a film, can be expressed as a long string of those two values. 1 means a charge is present in a cell. 0 means it is not. Inside a MicroSD card are billions of these cells, each built from a structure called a floating gate transistor. The floating gate sits between two layers of insulating material, electrically isolated from everything around it. When a charge is applied to this gate, it stays there, trapped by the insulating layers, after the power is removed. That trapped charge is a piece of your data. Billions of trapped or empty gates arranged across the card form the binary representation of everything you have stored. Reading the data works by detecting the charge state of each cell and converting the pattern back into the file it represents. Writing new data means applying or removing charges to set each gate to the required state. Erasing data means clearing an entire block of cells at once by flushing the charges out. What holds all of this together, and what makes the difference between a reliable card and a failing one, is the controller chip. This small processor sits inside the card and manages every read, write, and erase operation. It keeps track of which cells have been used most heavily, because flash memory cells wear out over time, and distributes new writes across different areas to spread the wear evenly. It detects errors and corrects them before they reach the file you are reading. Without the controller, the memory would wear out unevenly, data would corrupt quietly, and the card would fail far sooner than it does. The controller is the invisible manager that makes the whole system trustworthy enough to carry your photographs, your work, and your memories. The cloud did not replace this. The most common assumption about microSD cards is that they are becoming obsolete now that cloud storage exists. Why carry a physical card when photos can back up automatically to a server accessible from any device? That assumption works well in a city with reliable internet. It begins to fail the moment you step outside one. A microSD card works with no signal at all. On a plane, in a mountain range, on a boat far from shore, or in a place where data roaming costs more than the trip itself, the card works exactly as it does at home. Everything stored on it is available instantly, without a connection request or loading screen. Cloud storage depends on a round trip. When you want a file, your device sends a request to a server. The server finds the file and sends it back. For small files, this feels instant. For large video files or continuous footage from an action camera, the round trip takes time and fails entirely when the connection drops. There is also the question of control. A microSD card is a physical object belonging to whoever holds it. The files on it are not subject to a storage provider's terms of service, are not affected by a company changing its pricing or shutting down a product, and cannot be remotely accessed by anyone without the card itself. For people whose data matters to them, that directness is not a small thing. Where the card still wins. Today, you will find microSD cards doing work that cloud storage genuinely cannot replicate. An action camera mounted to a helmet on a mountain generates data continuously at resolutions that can exceed a gigabyte per minute. There is no cloud upload happening during the descent. The footage goes directly to the card, which sits in the camera absorbing everything the lens captures, undisturbed by vibration, temperature change, or the absence of any signal whatsoever. The card has to be fast enough to keep up with the data rate and reliable enough not to skip a frame during a fall or an impact. A network connection during an avalanche is not a plausible alternative. The card is what makes the recording exist at all. The Nintendo Switch carries a different kind of example. A single game downloaded to a MicroSD card can occupy 60 or 70 gigabytes of storage. It plays from the card at full speed, with no loading delays caused by network variability, whether the console is docked in a living room or carried on a plane with the Wi-Fi disabled. A decade ago, that volume of game data would have filled an entire shelf. Today, it sits on a card smaller than a postage stamp, carried in a pocket, ready whenever the console is. In both cases, the card is not a backup for the cloud. It is the primary storage, doing a job the cloud is structurally unsuited to do. That is why it is still here. Small enough to forget, big enough to matter. So, how can a MicroSD card smaller than a fingernail store your whole digital life? By converting everything into binary, storing each bit as a trapped electrical charge in a cell too small to see, and using a controller chip that manages billions of those cells quietly and continuously, distributing wear, correcting errors, and keeping the data exactly where it was left. Think about that old photograph again. The birthday, the holiday, the unremarkable afternoon. A MicroSD card is not just a tiny piece of storage. It is a miniature digital library using invisible electrical charges and a tiny controller chip to quietly protect the memories, files, and everyday data we carry with us. The card never announces itself. It never asks for attention. It just holds on, reliably, in a space small enough to lose between the cushions of a sofa. If this changed the way you think about the tiny card in your phone or camera, let us know in the comments what you want us to explore next. We might make it our next episode. Thanks for watching. History often hides in the smallest details.